I need my band. My dad is someone I don't know. Jerry Reed and Burt Reynolds were huge of their time. Changing Hollywood in one way with easy charm, the other one changing what American music means with feeling and toughness. In the movie, their relationship had looked easy, even happy, built on lots of laughs and common roots. But away from the tension, their relationship followed a road that is much more difficult. And before Burt Reynolds died, and he finally said what he had hid for years about Joe Reed. And no one was get ready for it. The pair that everyone liked, for years, people thought they knew the link between Burt and Reynolds and Bill Reed. On the screen, they looked like they couldn't be separated. Two men looked great in trade wit and loyalty as if it were in sync. It just felt right. It felt like chemistry. Real because it was. But behind the laughter and big box office numbers, Reynolds saw something odd about Reed that people never heard about. Something that didn't match the carefree picture. After many years, Reynolds finally talked about it, and his words made Thyra famous team in a very different light. But a long time before the public liked them as and together all the time, their relationship started not very loud, almost by chance. Reed first ran into Reynolds in the midline the 1970s, working with him in WW and the Gator and then the Dixie Dance Kings. It wasn't a cultural event on the level of what was going to happen next, but they Reynolds to see something other people didn't see it yet. Reed wasn't taught just like a normal actress. He didn't do things in Polish. What he had instead it was timing, feeling, and a sense of ease that most of the time, cameras don't let in new people. Reynolds paid attention. Then at this point, Reynolds was already moving from a powerful place in Hollywood. After being saved, he had changed into a big hit at the box office overnight. Because of how tough he is and being funny made him marketable, and movies like The Longest Yard made him even more popular. By the middle of the 1970s, he wasn't just besides acting in movies, he helped make them. That impact was very important during the How Smokey and the Bandit came to be. Reynolds wasn't just the lead in the project, and he was also in charge of it. And when it was time to choose who would play Snow, Cletus, Snowman, and the truck driver the opposite that was meant to balance the Bandit's strut, the studio had more than names in mind. There was no Jerry Reed at the top of their list. From my point of view, he was first an artist, a novelty acting choice with few movies experience. Reynolds, however, didn't agree Reed was important to him because he already knew what Reed had brought with him. Reed was from the South. He knew what the beat was, humor, stops, and the way of life that were important to the movie. Reynolds knew something that real couldn't but not natural. And because of them from their past work together, he trusted Reed's fully follow your feelings. At that time, Reed didn't need Hollywood to prove he was good. He had already won a Grammy for country artist who was known for both he writes songs and plays the guitar. Songs like the ones Guitar Man and Amos Moses' Medea voiced that people in America know music long before people ever saw him on screen wearing a cowboy hat. What hadn't had yet was a movie that would define them part. The game Smokey and the Bandit changed that. Reed did a lot more than play Snowman. Shaped the movie's sound as well. He wrote and sang Eastbound and Down, a song that didn't just go with the movie, but they couldn't stay away from it. The song caught the speed, the fun, and radical tone of the story, subpoint where it became the movie's not the official announcer. A lot of people, just hearing the beginning notes still sets OFFI remember truck stops, CB radios, and open the roads. It looked good on screen, there was no trouble between the men. Reynolds played a smooth criminal with a movie star fought back against his optimism. With real fun, honest talk, and perfect time for a joke. They met again. For Hooper, where Reed again played the way Reynolds' world works without messing with it. That wasn't the end, though. They came back for Smokey and the Bandit Point 2 and later showed up together in the Cannonball Run is a bunch of chaos. When Reynolds didn't want to take part in the third part of Smokey and the Bandit, Reed took on the lead part himself, something that would not have been possible a few years ago, to be exact. That alone a lot about how far Reed had come. And how much his screen name looks like had grown attached to the business Reynolds helped build. Out of view, the friendship seemed real to everyone, probably not. Their stories were alike. Backgrounds, a sense of fun, an understanding of what it means to be Southern. That didn't seem fake or overstated. Reynolds often talked with admiration for Reed's skills, especially how well he could move between without giving up. Music and movies, there is respect in both places. Still, even during the years when they did the best, Reynolds quietly paid attention toward that most people didn't know. Behind the laughs, behind the calm exterior, there were trouble signs that never came up when on news tours or interviews. Reynolds would say later that what Hugh had he saw off camera stuck with him and that he let some of it bother him more than he let it. Going on at the time. Because even though the audience saw great teamwork, the men behind it had a lot more on them. More than people ever thought. What Burt Reynolds stayed hidden from everyone. Mostly during the course of his work, Burt Reynolds a picture of ease and control. A man who he looked like he was happy with himself and looked like they were going through Hollywood without clearly seen strain. But behind that public confidence was a personal thing that was shaped by physical pain, being alone emotionally, and a chain of events that slowly followed piled up long before the public knew something was wrong. Reynolds had made a name for himself by being tough and trustworthy. And a part of that was because he wouldn't count on a choice to rely heavily on act doubles that made people on set respect him, but hurt for a long time and never really got better. Reynolds has had a long record of success. Pushed his body past what most the main players were ready to put up with, adamant about doing his own falls. There are fights and dangerous actions whenever possible. And while that promise brought his acts more to life, also caused injuries that came after him for many years. It wasn't damage only applies to one event or job, knee troubles that got worse over time, back pain, and other long-lasting becoming a part of his daily life. His real life, not just his role on screen, kept pointing to strength and not defeatable. It was one of the worst problems came up while City was being filmed, Heat, when Reynolds was hurt and had to deal with an awful jaw injury that needed long-term medical care and a lot of during his hard recovery. He met drugs that you get from your doctor stay a part of his life for a lot longer than meant to. People didn't see what that hurt did to his relationship with pain and power. As going on, pain and suffering became constant appearance, and his need for medication made it hard to tell the difference between and an addiction. This made his health worse. During a time when his job was also moving away from the he used to be in charge. As parts went down in number and box office moving less quickly, the physical limitations he had been ignoring for a long time impossible to beat. He was left with less movement and long-term pain that shaped his later years much more than most fans have ever known. Along with the fall in health was an emotional problem that Reynolds barely talked about freely when he was at his best. This was because his brand was built on his charm, fun, and confidence instead of being open. In private, he struggled with sadness that got worse as his injuries got worse and opportunities got smaller. Afterward, admitted to feeling alone during times when he could still be recognized everywhere he went. He talked about a sense of being alone that had little to do with fame and everything to do with unfinished sorrow and the loss of he used to take his steadiness for granted. That his unstable behavior spread to his money, a place where Reynolds' public image again covered up a much more complicated the truth. Even though they made millions during his most prosperous years, he spent habits, choices in work, and personal life slowly destroyed the finances. Peace of mind those gains should have was given. Reynolds put a lot of money into business projects that didn't make money, kept up an expensive way of life that he thought that his pay would never go down, and didn't realize how quickly costs would rise could be too much for even a large fortune. When the career was losing steam. The things got worse in the early 1990s. When bills and court fees keep going up brought him close to going broke. A big one reason for those money problems was they got married to Lonnie Anderson, a connection that drew intense from the start. The media paid attention and became more and more controversial behind closed doors. Their marriage, which from 1988 to 1994, and ended with a nasty and expensive divorce that legal fees used up all of his money. Villages and towns. This made me feel more, adding stress to a time that was already hard. As his money problems got worse, Reynolds was forced to sell personal property, items of interest and sentimental value, things that have to do with his job and who he is, not as a sign of respect, but as aid is necessary to pay off bills. That it was no longer possible to run things quietly. Reynolds' life was romantically a similar pattern of strength that was then lost in ties with famous people that almost never ended well and often left as long-lasting mental harm. Even though Hugh was linked to a number of well-known people over the years, one relationship stayed at the center of his own thoughts after it was over. How he was connected with Sally Field, who he later said was the woman he loves. Their relationship, which took place during the height of his success, in the early 1980s. In the end, Reynolds would say that he thought about the breakup more than hell. Let everyone see at the time, becoming a reason to feel bad that came up again and again as other parts of his life fell apart. As time goes on moved on, and there was a gap between his reputation and his real place, and it got bigger in Hollywood. Since after taking over the box office throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, the energy that had helped him get his job started to slow in ways that were hard to backwards. A string of poor performances the movies he was in hurt his credibility as the lead man. Stories about fights on set in opposition to the studio he went into rooms with hopes. The place where choices were made. This gradually changed how bosses saw him. The business that had once built the projects that were based on his appearance carefully, then far away, leaving Reynolds to deal with a fall in his career, had not thought about or planned for at the time. They admitted it in public. Reynolds kept working steadily, but some of the parts didn't have the cultural weight of his past wins, and the trust he used to have in the talks were no longer turned into lean on. Hollywood had moved on, and Reynolds, who had done well in Ath once praised his senses, was able to get through one that NOI no longer gave them the same kind of rewards. That's why he showed up in Boogie Nights, shocked almost everyone. Cast because the director is difficult and moody, Reynolds put on a show that took away a lot of his charm known for and switched it out for something not as smooth and cozy. The part got him a nomination for an Academy Award and moved him around for a short time as opening the door for his serious theatrical actordo chances that seemed to be closed quite a few years ago. Still, even as the movie sparked renewed interest in, Reynolds later took a step back from himself from it and talking about the project as being too dark and showing pain with the tone. This response showed his ongoing battle to make peace with leaving a public legacy with jobs that challenged it. At the same time, the physical and health effects from past years still shaped his daily life, most notably his reliance on taking prescription drugs. This made his health worse and contributed to the weakness that was getting worse clear as he aged. He was sick. Got worse as heart problems showed up, leading up to quintuple bypass surgery in 2010, a process that emphasized how much his body had been through since then when the cameras stopped filming his being tough. Even with these setbacks, Reynolds never really left work, keep taking on roles, and look good in public even as the health got worse. In private, he talked more freely about being alone and feeling regret, especially as friendships grew weaker and life moved more slowly. He thought about the price of choices made decades ago earlier, such as declining roles that became important events in American history movies. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and terms off choices he allowed weighed heavily on his mind. On him to remind him of chances that could have changed his later the job. From his own words, Reynolds, he showed up without any confidence. That used to make his public picture, giving details about a life that, a lot of fame and wealth, left him feeling unhappy and weighed down by things he could no longer fix went wrong. And while Reynolds' problems grew most of the time out of sight, his closest partner during his most famous work years was facing a quiet demise of his own. One that came after a different route, but it led to heavy the results. The terrible struggles that then came. John Reid. A long time ago people knew Jerry Reid as the clever snowman or the man behind there are some of the most well-known country 200-year-old guitar riffs. His life had been shaped by his instability, poverty, and a state offered times that never fully eased its grip hold on. Reid was born into a poor family of cotton farmers. A farming family lives in the country of Georgia. There was always financial instability and being emotionally stable was never 100% sure. Conditions in the beginning made him grow up fast in situations that didn't offer much safety or knowing what to expect. Since Reid spent some time in foster care as a child. After things with his family got more and more unsteady, moving between places that gave people safety but they rarely feel like they'll stay put. Music became his safe place. He took when he was young and showed an unusual natural talent almost right away. He learned rhythm and toe music without thinking about it school-wise. And when he was a teenager, he played in bars already and performing for adults in bars. Reid began to record songs in the 1950s, getting into a business that offered chance, but not much time for artists who didn't quite fit into expectations in business. His first name contracts did not give what they promised. It's not because of a lack of, because he didn't sound like him fit in perfectly with current styles. Reid supported during this time doing odd jobs for himself while writing, playing, and recording more. That hard work paid off in the end when Reid's song was covered by Elvis Presley, Guitar Man, an event that changed Reid's life, standing in the business world overnight. Even though Presley backed it, just proved the song. It proved that Reid, who writes songs and plays music, going through doors that had stayed closed. After that, Reid's career took off after that. Leading to top success in the end to Grammy Awards and a wider audience being seen. That being said, even as AA's fame grew, personal habits changed. Those formed earlier in life stayed strong. Put in place, especially his reliance on light up. Reid used to smoke a lot for most of his adult life. And while the habit was rarely talked about in public, it had a quiet effect on his health over time, which leads to physical limits that became more and more not easy to ignore. His happy personal style and easygoing fun made it was easy for people to think he was not affected by the stress of the job. But those who were close to him knew that the energy he put out was often kept ongoing struggles with rely on others and control yourself. As the years went by, and the effects of those, it became easier to see the habits coming out. Reid got emphysema and other major lung problems. Health problems that got better over time. His strength and ability to breathe performing, which used to come naturally to him, became hard on the body, then tiring, and more not manageable. Even so, Reid refused to step away for good, but they kept recording and show up on stage as long as his body okay to do. He didn't fall quickly. It was constant and marked by shorter list touring, fewer shows, and a lot of time away from the attention. During this time, Reed paid attention to When You Can, Write and Record, driven to keep being creative even as their physical strength went down. His voice, which used to be smooth and strong, worked too hard, and he lost the ability to play for long periods of time, decreased. As Jerry Reed became known for more than a new set of pressures then came. Since the public loved him on TV, the business world rarely imagined him outside of a limited number of jobs. In movies like the movie Smokey and the Bandit, Hooper, and Reed became closely linked to the comic Southern sidekick as a name that was made on jokes, warmth, and gut instead of change. Even though a lot of people loved the shows, slowly set standards about what he was able to act as he pleased. After many years, when he was in The Waterboy, the part made that same point clear to public image, and charming people confirming in a quiet way that Hollywood they still saw him through a lens they knew. This typecasting made a slight, but Reed's job has a lot of stress all the time. He was already known for being a serious song inventor who was known for his guitar skill with music, making songs, and range of creativity. On set, though, those having certificates rarely led tokens that pushed him to grow dramatically. And even though Reed battles in public over jobs, acting stayed second, that much was clear. To how people in the business saw him. His job in movies made people aware of steady work, but it never got to the best of his artistic or cultural work music. This made people respect him, easy to recognize but limited within a narrow character over which he had little power, too much reworking. In terms of money, Reed's journey was like that of many singers artists who came of age before kept power and ownership for a long time about their work. At the start of his work, unpredictable royalties and income sets of rules meant that success did not always lead to cash gain ease of use. He had to stay because of this. Being active and flexible even during times when his name meant something. The country music business, especially as he changed in the 1970s and 1980s, praised newness and youth very strongly. Because of this, Reed had to always changing his sound, his partnerships, and being seen by the public to stay in business in a world that almost never stood still. In the 1990s, that being able to change looked like work together when Reed joined the old with Juan Jennings and the Dogs, Mel Bob Bear and Tillis. The group drew based on shared history. Andre a way to fix his names, get back in touch with viewers while still what kind of stories and skills that had made him famous the earlier years. It wasn't a new idea. Like we use the word today, but it was a confirmation and a warning that what mattered was the content, not the trend. Even though his health worsened, Reed refused to go back totally away from creative work, going on to write, record, and help wherever his physical condition is okay. In line with those closest to him saw him keep busy, and he stayed in the room as long as he could, steadily until his body said no longer worked together. Not out of duty, but because God had made was always the way he was. The decrease in strength over time shows first, then trips, and finally longer sessions. Still, Reed changed. Quietly, making it harder to see without calling for an end. On September 1, Reed passed away in Nashville, Tennessee, in 2008. From problems caused by emphysema, ending a life marked by endurance more than ease. People felt his death. Right away across both countries, the music world and the movie world, rather than focusing on chart places, tributes, number of the theater, and more on the regularity of his work and how his being there had changed projects without being too much for them. Also, thoughts about Reed's impact began to surface. One voice carried weight long before the people looked at it again. They're working together. Burt Reynolds had thoughts about Jerry were shared secretly. Reed, which showed a deeper, more the dirty truth about the man people thought they knew. This the confession would later cast their being friends in a whole new way light. Burt Reynolds broke the quiet on John Reed. When Burt Reynolds talked later in life, talking about Jerry Reed in public, the weight of his words was different than the funny stories people Reed were used to hearing. At that point, there was no idea to market and no picture, only reflection made by getting away and losing. According to Reynolds, went back to the same spot whenever Reed's name came up. His skill wasn't singular, and that wasn't by chance. He talked about how Reed moving easily between acting and singing, saying that Reed knew about timing in a way that could not be taught, and that his senses made every scene better they gave. Reynolds stood out, and it was clear what part Reed played and shaped Smokey's personality in The Bandit, stating that the movies didn't just come from shows or stunts, but because of the way it sounds and beats. Both of these Reed helped to describe. He repeatedly brought up the fact that Eastbound Up and Down wasn't just a song, but something that turned into not separate from the movie itself. Reynolds praised Reed's original being from the South and having great comedic timing with putting the movie in its place, saying that Reed brought about a balance that let to use humor that doesn't feel forced or over the top. Besides skill, Reynolds made it clear that it went way beyond professional ease of use. He said that Reed wasn't as a co-star, but as a real friend, someone who liked funny things as much as he did telling stories in country life, someone whose company felt right instead of being smart. Reynolds emphasized that what people saw on the screen wasn't made of science, but a real bond that lasted into their time away from the camera, which changed how the movies were made and how the scenes played out. Reynolds says that Reed's presence made the Smokey films less tight and warmth that wasn't the redone again with someone else. After Reed's death in 2008, Reynolds' voice shifted dramatically every time he spoke about him, and photos from that period showed how much he was feeling. He almost never let himself show in public. He said that Reed's death had an effect on him deeply, telling him that the link was more than just a shared screen. That they would lose time, and Reed one of the few guys in Hollywood you can fully trust. Reynolds talked about Reed as a brother, which was not a word he used casually, which shows how rare that is about how much trust there was in and where partnerships were often short-term. Reynolds also went back to the famous story about hiring, remembering how Reed at first, they turned down Smokey and the Bandit. Because of problems with other plans, and how without pause, he replied. Reynolds said the same things over and over with confidence and amusement. Well, he'll just go to your house and throw you in the car and take you to the set himself. He said that the insistence was because he thought Reed was the only one who could play how to do it right. Cletus, Snowman, and Snow.as. I thought about Reed taking over the Smokey and the Bandit. Part 3. Reynolds went up to the funny about the subject instead of defensiveness and recognizing Reed's ready to help when he didn't want Toto come back. Reynolds put a space himself from the third movie, has shown respect for Reed's friendly attitude and his readiness in order to keep the brand going, bringing the same point home Reynolds reached many times in his later years, that Jerry Reed wasn't just a friend of his, but he was one of the few people who I really told him about it. Reed himself. I'd also like to talk about Reynolds and tell them what he had been keeping secret for years. What Jerry Reed said about Reynolds. When Jerry Reed talked about Burt Reynolds, he showed how important Reynolds had gone on his trip in movie. Reed always put Reynolds in context. For being a good friend who opened doors at times when Hollywood wasn't generally inclined to do that, and he never changed his mind on the fact that his acting career Reynolds was ready to make changes. Push for him when other people were hesitant. Reed he admitted outright that his choice in Smokey and the Bandit didn't happen by chance or studio excitement, but because Reynolds said so. He gave credit Reynolds to picking up on something in that was more than just funny or unusual for him. Thanks. Also, he knew that without the part of Cletus in that demand, it's possible that Snowman Snow could have gone to someone else. Reed a lot of the time smiled as they thought about that time, talking with a level of comfort that suggested thanks without going too far and respect without doing anything, which it was clear that Reynolds' help was not businesslike, but personal. One of their most often went back to certain stories showed that relationship more clearly than any official honor ever could. The first time Reynolds called him, "If you want to join Smokey and the Bandit," Reed paused and said that he had having responsibilities and scheduling problems that made making the movie not easy. Reynolds' answer, according Reed, wasn't making deals or in the usual sense of the word, but not giving up. Reed got that at that point. At least one time when Reynolds wasn't acting, he was really eager to have Reed in the movie. To get rid of all the blocks himself, and that level of resolve was strong weight. Reed agreed to work on the project. What came next was one of the most well-known couples in popular A movie from the time. A choice Reed made later admitted that audiences and studios looked at him. After many years, when Reynolds didn't want to come back for Smokey, Reed found Jack in the Bandit Part 3. He found himself in an unexpected situation, taking over the job that had been laid out Reynolds' role on screen. Rather than having respect for the moment or after some thought, Reed talked about it with the same rude humor that had always an important part of his charm, capturing both surprise and excitement. Laughed, being honest about the change, saying, "I get it. I don't have to drive to be the thief. Don't have to haul anything in the truck." After that, he said another line that people in the crowd remembered just as well: "I'm going to steal something. I get to put on the hat and drive the car. I love this." Even though it was said with fun and in the comments showed Reed's personality. Being aware of what the job meant, not just a new outfit, but a moment of significance in his friendship with Reynolds and the team they were built together. Reed never put together the chance to take Reynolds' place. Butos, his friend, stepped into something had made possible in the first place. Reed never made his case too strong. Part in Reynolds' life or claimed to be his child with him in the social order of Hollywood, rather than letting small stories and rough comments speak for by themselves. If you like this video, don't forget to click on the next movie. Like this movie on your screen, and join our channel to see more. Changes.